disabilities have the same rights as everyone else. But people often have wrong ideas and beliefs about us. This causes people to treat us badly and not let us make important choices. This has made life harder for us. But the situation is slowly getting better.
Hello, I'm Mademoiselle, 23 years young. I have a job, so I get no pay salary. I also get paid when I am invited to speak or to work here and there. But where can I save my money? I found it injustice when I can't even have an account number only because I am a person with a disability who loves that people with disability like me has no legal capacity. What is legal capacity anyway? Do you see me as someone with no legal capacity that what is good or what is bad, what is wrong or what is right?
Pendidikan tentang seks saat ini belum ada secara merata. Karena saya dan teman-teman tidak mendapatkan itu. Adil itu saya dan teman-teman memberikan pendidikan seks yang benar. Yang harus kita ketahui agar kami bisa melindungi diri dari pelaku kejahatan seksual. Saya rasanya segar. Terima kasih.
Halo, saya Nia. Ketika waktu saya di sekolah dan tempat khusus mentari dibuat mudah dan mengerti bahasa sehana. Terima kasih.
Saya Fajar Sianari. Saya bisa membaca dan menulis, dan saya ingin sekolah yang baik supaya bisa bekerja. Saya ingin hidup di dunia yang inklusif, tapi seringkali saya tidak diterima karena saya penyandang Down syndrome. Keadilan adalah ketika saya diperlakukan setara, inklusi, dan hak-hak saya dihormati agar potensi saya berkembang optimal.
Saya Afra Nanda Agustia, umur aku 5 tahun. Saya pernah mencapai Makirikan SKS mencapai saya menanti putri di kelas ayah umum di tes kitab di GBSD. Setelah saya mengerti dan bisa menulis diri sendiri, anjir kalau saya melakukan dibilang istilah.
Thank you very much and welcome to this working session on access to justice for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities in Asia and the Pacific. I'm sorry for the delayed start. We experienced some technical issues. I think that is something we can discuss in more details later on when we talk about legal technology and other sessions. Anyway, I am Doreen Buettner, the program specialist for access to justice for UN Women, the Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. And I would like to thank the young people from Yapesti for the message about what justice means to them, messages that are important for us to hear and understand and act upon. Before I begin, let me run through some logistical and technical details. The session will run for around about 1.5 hours. That should take us to now around about 12:30. The best way to view the session is by setting your Zoom view to speaker view. And the audience is welcome to use the chat box or the World Justice Forum app throughout the sessions. We will collect questions and share some question and answers at the end of the program. We do have international sign language interpretation for this event and also French interpretation. Thank you very much to our interpreters. The event is being recorded and will be available on the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific website. We hope to also have capturing for the recording and an easy read summary at a later stage to ensure that it is accessible for as many viewers as possible. So let's start. Welcome once again to the working session and thank you so much for your participation. This event is somewhat unique in that it brings together representatives of the justice and disability together to tackle issues around access to justice for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. We see this as an opportunity to explore and build solutions in partnership by co-designing, co-creating solutions. We are putting people at the center of justice and make sure it is fit for purpose. This is especially important for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities who are among the most marginalized, misunderstood, and often discriminated against when it comes to access to justice. Our session begins with an overview of the barriers that exist and the International Human Rights Framework. Disability rights advocates will then share challenges they and others in their community encounter when accessing justice or attempting to do so, and the opportunities to address these justice barriers. We will then shift the focus to solution building, where we hear about a legal needs survey and discuss other actions that could be taken to ensure access to justice for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. Okay, let me start with our first guest. I have now the pleasure of introducing Rosemary Kayess. Rosemary is the chair of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disability. She is an internationally recognized human rights lawyer in the area of disability and has taught international human rights law and anti-discrimination law at the University of New South Wales, Faculty of Law for the past 15 years. Rosemary was a designated expert on the Australian government delegation to the UN negotiation for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Rosemary has pre-recorded a short video for us as she is sharing a UN treaty body meeting in New York today. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to make this address to you today. Women with disabilities are pitted against a justice system that fails to recognise and accommodate our needs. Combined with the denial of legal capacity, women with disabilities have limited opportunities for the realisation of agency, autonomy, and self-determination. The Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has outlined specific issues and concerns for women and girls with disabilities in its general comment, number 3. Harmful stereotypes, discrimination, the lack of procedural and reasonable accommodation results in our credibility being doubted and our issues dismissed. Our rights to maintain control over our bodies and reproductive health, including on the basis of free and informed consent, to own and inherit property, to control our own financial affairs, are often denied through systems of substitute decision-making. This denial of justice is the outcome of the intersection of patriarchy and ableism. Our ability to seek justice rests with our right to equality before the law and the recognition of our legal capacity, our ability to hold rights and our ability to exercise those rights. The exercise of legal capacity has most commonly been denied to people with disabilities in legal systems worldwide. But this denial has also been applied to other groups, particularly women and ethnic minorities. The historical denial of the exercise of legal capacity for women, as for people with disabilities, is largely based on the normative standard of what it means to be human. Disability and femaleness are constructed as falling outside this normative standard. The view of the autonomous rational male. Disability is conceptualised as a deficit located in the individual, a deviation from bodily, cognitive and mental norms that requires a range of medical and expert interventions to diagnose, treat and cure. Femaleness is conceptualised as non-rational. These conceptualisations mean that people with disabilities and women are considered as different, as exceptions, as other. We are conceived as vulnerable and in need of protection. For women with disabilities, this has specific, unique and compounding effects. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities codifies a human rights model of disability. The Convention recognises disability as a social construct, values impairment as part of human diversity and human dignity, and affirms that impairment can never be the basis for the denial or diminishment of human rights. Importantly, the Convention recognises the diversity of people with disability and outlines an intersectional approach to its implementation. Inequality and discrimination are experienced differently depending on how disability intersects with other personal identities and characteristics, such as gender, age, race, Indigenous and LGBTI status. It means that the issues and concerns for women with disabilities, and importantly, equality before the law and access to justice, need to be specifically recognised, identified and addressed. Until this occurs, the justice system will continue to fail women with disabilities, and the realisation of agency, autonomy and self-determination will be thwarted. Women with disabilities need to be central to the transformation of the justice system. And I'm pleased that today's event provides an important forum for women with disabilities to raise their views, concerns and solutions in relation to access to justice. I wish you well for your discussions and positive outcomes. Thank you.
A big thank you to Rosemary, who has so adeptly explained how gender and disability intersects to create multiple forms of discrimination, and how that creates many barriers to women's access to justice, and how this translates to limited opportunity for women's agency, autonomy, and self-determination. She also underlined the importance of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in recognizing and addressing these issues. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Vera from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA. She will speak about some of the barriers that Rosemary touched on to give us a sense of the scale of the challenge confronting women with intellectual and psychosocial disability. Vera is a senior policy advisor for health for Asia and the Middle East at SIDA. She has over 10 years of international experience in public health with a focus on health systems, strengthening quality and process improvement, e-health and mental health and psychosocial support. Before she begins, let me take this opportunity to thank SIDA for its ongoing support for enhancing women's access to justice throughout Asia and the Pacific, and for the international leadership on the rights of persons with disability. Vera, you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you, Doreen, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with such a distinguished group of women, and I also want to thank you and women for hosting this very important session. And we here at SIDA in Sweden are very happy to support these efforts to make sure that all women have access to justice. And barriers to justice for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities are very complex and interwoven, as we heard the prior speaker outlining, and intersecting discrimination that women with disabilities face are very complex. So it was very good to get that as an outset. So I have a few minutes where I would like to unpack some of the most challenging barriers that face women with intellectual and psychosocial disability. And maybe to start out, the first is the legal capacity, which is one of the biggest obstacles, where we see guardianship procedures and other substitute decision-making regimens remove or limit these women's abilities to go to court or to initiate legal proceedings. And in addition, practices that assess competence to participate in proceedings are often very discriminatory, applied to people with intellectual and psychosocial disability. And we see direct or indirect questioning of legal capacity coupled with gender-based discrimination really impact the entire justice change response to women. Just as an example, justice actors many times perceive women with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities of being less credible witnesses, deteriorating them from filing complaints or giving evidence or even testifying in court. And in the cases of sexual and gender-based violence, women often are the only witnesses besides the perpetrator. So these really results in legal sort of denials of their capacity and coupled with gender biases that women have specifically with have much poorer justice outcomes than their counterparts. So the second point is that national laws are many times not in line with the international human rights instruments, as we also heard the prior speaker saying, this such as the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This really allows for the violation of rights of women with these disabilities, such as forced sterilization and institutionalization. And many times these women have no legal resources to challenge these decisions, especially in institutions which often lack independent complaint mechanisms for individuals or adequate information channels regarding their rights. And thirdly, the lack of legal assistance, representation, or judicial support to assist women to navigate these very, very complex justice system results in disproportionate cases being withdrawn from proceeding that before they even have concluded. And one of the key barriers to accessing the system is really the knowledge gap of disability issues within the law and justice enforcement sector. Many times, if women do get legal assistance, many times these lawyers do not have appropriate training or support to support their clients with disabilities, and there are very, very few law schools that are providing such training, for example. And then we also see that women with intellectual and psychosocial disability face greater economical barriers associated with accessing justice, as they are much more likely to live in poverty than women without disabilities or even men with disabilities. And there's often a lack of government budgeting to assist these women who are unable to first afford a legal representation, but even, such things as accessing public transport or costs associated with access to justice. I think it's also important to highlight that many times there's a lack of support for many women that are caretaker of their family members with intellectual and psychosocial disability, and even these women face stigma and barriers to the legal system when they try to apply for their family members. It is also staggering to see how little funding is budgeted from governments to assist women with disability. But sadly, as more than often, their voices are not heard. And that's why I'm very happy that we're all here today to change this and make sure that women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities really can enjoy the full right of their legal and human rights. And I just want to stop by saying that these are by no means all the barriers that women with intellectual and psychosocial disability face, but I just wanted to give sort of a sense of the scale of the challenge that is ahead of us. And I think it's so important that we need to bring the disability and the justice community, as we mentioned before, to listen and to identify and understand the challenges ahead of us, and really work together on a people-centered approach where we put the right of the Convention of the Right of Peoples with Disability at the center, to be able to transform the justice system so they can be gender responsive and disability inclusive. And with that, I will end, and thank you all for listening. And I'm very excited to hear the other speakers here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vera, for that examination of some of the barriers faced by women with intellectual and psychosocial disability. It just shows how difficult it is for this group of women to access justice and achieve actually a meaningful outcome. Our next segment of the session, I am super excited about. We will hear from our gender and disability rights advocates, more than one. They will share with us their own personal experience, observation, and thoughts about the justice journey of women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. They will also share opportunities to improve such journeys to ensure meaningful justice outcomes. I would like to start with Dewi. Dewi is a woman human rights defender and founder of YAPESTI, a Jakarta-based non-profit organization that empowers youth with intellectual disabilities to become self-advocates. Together with her son, disability self-advocate Morgan Mays, she hosts weekly classes called Let's Speak Up for young people with Down syndrome to learn soft skills to rebuild their self-confidence, understand their rights, and be active citizens. We were fortunate to hear directly from Morgan and the Let's Speak Up classmates on what justice means to them at the beginning of the session. Dewi is also a leading member of a network that provides oversight of existing and draft legislation to ensure compliance with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Dewi, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here. My question to you, bringing together your gender and disability advocacy, we would be grateful to hear about the challenges and opportunities for women with intellectual disabilities in Indonesia when engaging with the justice system, both on criminal and on civil matters. For example, only a few weeks ago, Indonesia adopted a law to address sexual violence. What do you think is the potential impact for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities? Dewi, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Doreen. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to the rest of us. I'm afraid not able to keep the time right, so I will read my presentation instead of pointers. Okay. Justice for girls and women with intellectual disabilities. Next. Next. Down syndrome as one of intellectual disability types is the most common genetic chromosomal disorder and cause of learning disabilities in children. It is estimated based on Indonesia's 2020 population, there are approximately 341,000 children or adults living with Down syndrome. But where are they? Many are hidden or left out in the shelter. Children with Down syndrome or intellectual disabilities experience discrimination, inequality, and denial of their human rights from a very young age. Where education is received, it is often inadequate and not in accessible formats for them. Next. Next. The education system discriminates both with children with intellectual disabilities, where the public schools reject them. Thus, they were shocked to go to special school where the curricula is so low in terms of quality. After passing the special high school, students with Down syndrome rarely could read and write. Some even are not able to speak. Children who are not equipped with education are ill-equipped for life. They lack information about and awareness of their rights. In vocational school, to upgrade their skill, they couldn't find anything that could accommodate their needs. The teaching materials are written in a complex language that they don't understand. The teachers or facilitators are not trained to handle or to help the students. So imagine how they could compete with the others on getting a paid job. The lack of accessible format is a problem encountered in many areas of life, including when seeking assistance from law enforcement and justice sector. Next, please. Girls and women with intellectual disabilities are the highest in number as victims of sexual violence. Yet government has done nothing to prevent this from happening again and again. Moreover, family and society still believe that persons with intellectual disability are asexual. This certainly makes things more complicated for them. Because they are considered asexual, then parents, educators, and society do not feel the need to provide sex education, even the simplest one. So they do not have the provision to know how to equip themselves or protect their bodies from sexual predators. When speaking about justice for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, we must place a focus on prevention, including through education of parents and young people with disabilities. Next. We have laws that blatantly discriminate persons with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, both in criminal and in civil matters. Persons with intellectual disability cannot co-found an organization, even a disabled person organization, cannot have an account in a bank, as Morgan had said in the video, because they got labeled as having no legal capacity. In criminal matters, persons with intellectual or psychosocial disability statement or testimony most of the time are denied or rejected, often face the second ordeal because law enforcers treated them improperly while they reported their case, because the state apparatus believes that they have no legal and or mental capacity to tell their side of the story. Next, please. Insensitive and stigmatizing attitudes from law enforcement officials are a major cause of widespread underreporting of sexual abuse. When victims of sexual abuse face skepticism or victim blaming from police and other members of the justice sector, it can exacerbate the trauma they face. Many state apparatus never been trained on disability inclusion or gender equality. Luckily, the new sexual violence criminal law is just passed earlier this month, the first victory of the Indonesian women's struggle to fight sexual violence. Next, please. As for the new law, all members of society need to ensure that the law will be potent to address sexual violence cases and to protect its victims, including women with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. The law has several articles that specifically apply to and that are crucial for persons with disability. For example, concerning witness or victim testimony. Witness and or victim testimony of persons with disabilities have the same legal force as the testimony of witnesses and of victims from typical persons. Witness and or victim statements shall be supported by personal assessment as stipulated in the laws and regulations regarding proper accommodation for persons with disabilities in the judicial process. We hope that this legislation will improve access to justice for all women, including women with psychosocial and or intellectual disabilities, who, as I mentioned earlier, suffer the highest rates of sexual violence. Next, please. Some of the most important aspects of the law are focused strongly on victims. The law clearly states that victims have the right to have their case processed, the right to protection, and the right to restitution and recovery. Cases of sexual violence cannot be resolved through alternative dispute resolution or restorative justice approaches. Police, prosecutors, and judges who handle cases of sexual violence must have integrity and competence, and a victim-centered approach to case handling. In line with human rights principles, also they must participate in specialized gender training. Next, please. Opportunities for improving access to justice. The challenges are immense, but as evidenced by the passing of the sexual violence law, there are opportunities to advocate for and seek changes and to empower young women with intellectual disabilities so that their experience of justice and society is better and fairer. My organization works to answer some of the challenges facing by our rights holders in our class. As a feminist organization, we prioritize young women to join our class. We accommodate their needs by giving them safe space, train them on soft skills that been overlooked all those times when they were at special school or even at home. Give them sense of confidence, responsibilities, also rights. We also introduce them to sexual education, basic SRHR, and on how to protect themselves from sexual predators. Next, please. And as a closing statement, I will just quote my son Morgan's statement of hope that state party will treat all people the same as persons who have the same rights as others and change all the laws that discriminate people with intellectual disability and or psychosocial, that we all will stop labeling each other. So let's read out loud what's written on his t-shirt. Don't count my chromosomes, encourage my participation, and value my ability. Break the bias, this is our fight. Next. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Dewi, for your perspective and to share with us the work or some of the work that you have been doing as an advocate for women's rights and the rights of persons with disability. It is really a great demonstration of how family members can be strong and empowering advocates in partnership with their children. So thank you so much. It was a lovely presentation. Our next speaker is Kamala. Kamala is a self-advocate for the rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Drawing from her own experience, she supports young people with psychosocial disabilities through community awareness programs and psychosocial support, such as counseling, to realize their rights, reach their potential, and participate fully and equally in society. Kamala works as a program officer with Kayess, a national mental health self-help organization of persons with disabilities in Nepal. She has witnessed firsthand the critical support provided by organizations of persons with disability and credits the support she received from Kayess as giving her renewed hope and courage to live life once again. Kamala, you have lived experience of the enormous challenges faced by women with psychosocial disabilities, and you now help others as they seek to overcome similar barriers. Thinking about the challenges and opportunities that exist, can you please share with us the experience of women with psychosocial disabilities and some of the barriers they encounter when trying access to justice? We would also be interested to hear about the role of organizations of persons with disabilities. Over to you, Kamala, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. My name is Kamala Poudel. I am a Nepalese person. And I'm a person with lived experience of mental health issues in my life. And I represent a disabled people organization, Kayess, which is a Nepali organization working for the mental health of the people, mental health well-being of the people in Nepal. Very frankly, when we talk about justice-seeking behavior in the women with intellectual or mental health disability, the grassroots situation at times, unfortunately, is ignored or cannot be noticed. I come from the grassroots itself, and I will just tell you what happens in Nepal. Women who happens to have a mental health related issue or intellectual ability related issue, even today they are chained, locked up, and abandoned on the streets. I was myself abandoned on the streets from where Kayess rescued me 8 years ago, and they gave me treatment, they gave me therapies, and they made me, they transformed my life to the extent that today I am helping other women in my kind of situation. The thing is, very honestly, there is a conflict, unfortunately, between the individual rights of these women, including my rights, and the social norms in Asia. Most of the countries in Asia, we have absolutely patriarchal society where women even otherwise are not given any status, be it economic empowerment, be it cultural empowerment. On top of it, the women who happen to have psychosocial disabilities or mental health disabilities or intellectual disabilities, they are treated like a subordinate person altogether. They have no existence in the society to seek anything which they want or desire. Society decides for them. And when we try to seek justice, like for myself, when I tried to seek justice for myself in many matters, there was a conflict, unfortunate conflict between these patriarchal social norms and my rights. That is not the right side of the fence for women. We women who have psychosocial, mental health, intellectual disabilities, we are already grappling with severe social stigma, as also prejudice, cultural prejudice, as also discrimination. But being on the wrong side of the fence always is what it hurts us. Unfortunately, there are many barriers in the laws in Asian countries, almost all Asian countries here. The situation is almost just the same, be it Pakistan, be it Nepal, be it Indonesia. Women are having a subordinate status, especially those who have mental health issues or intellectual disability. So because of this dilemma, these women, they need to be supported, but there are legal barriers. In Nepal, would you believe there are about 43 acts and 5 rules and 3 bills which we studied at Kayess, which have derogatory words against women with mental health issues. Would you believe that? And we have filed at Kayess a public interest litigation to remove these derogatory provisions. But since the justice system lingers on, so it will take, I don't know how many more years or decades for these derogatory words to be removed from the legal enactments. They say baula, which means mad. I mean, those kind of words, they would discourage any kind of woman to go to the court. And then there are discriminatory provisions. And then apart from that, there is insensitivity of the, I should not use the word insensitivity, but I actually felt there is insensitivity in the system, the judicial, justice access system. So we need to have a lot of awareness, sensitization on the true nature of these disabilities, the mental health disabilities and intellectual disabilities. Article 3 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the People with Disabilities clearly states that we should not look down upon people, especially the women with mental health intellectual disabilities. Rather, we should treat their disability as part of a human variety. It's like the word would be probably, they are just different, but they are not a footmat. We are just different from others, but we should be accepted. We are not a footmat, or we are not a subordinate status. And then there are other barriers. The derogatory provisions are there, but then the adversarial model of the justice access system, we have to fight. we cannot bargain with the society for rehabilitation, because what a woman needs after being suffering some kind of injustice, like be it sexual violence, be it mental health violence, be it any kind of abuse, the immediate need of the women is, of course, to get hold of the culprit and to seek justice against the culprit, but also some kind of social support system, so that the women can take the justice seeking behavior to its ultimate end and ensure that the culprit is taken care of. But that is lacking, unfortunately. In Asia, most of the countries, there is an adversarial system wherein we have to fight with the culprit and the society as well. Then there is another barrier is lack of knowledge and information. Like the UNFPA fact sheet of Nepal says that only 25% of the women surveyed have any knowledge about the services available for the gender-based violence victims, survivors. 61% of the women in Nepal, they don't want to make a complaint altogether. This is the finding of the UNFPA survey about a couple of years ago. Imagine 61% don't want to make a complaint altogether because they are scared of the society, because they are scared they will be on the wrong side of the fence. But there are a lot of opportunities also. Painting a negative picture is not good, especially at this international forum here today. There are a lot of opportunities also, and the DPOs, the disabled people organizations, like I'm representing one disabled people organization, DPO Koshish. There is a lot of opportunities also. We have a presence of UN Women and other UN agencies in Nepal. We have social media, especially in the big cities of Nepal, not in the rural areas, but we have radios and televisions in the rural Nepal and other rural areas of Asian countries. So if we can have more disabled people organizations, then the situation is not that bad. We can work upon it slowly, because these disabled people organizations, they can iron out the conflict between the social norms and the individual rights of the women. And these disabled people organizations, they already have experience. They are like senior peer to us, and they have the capacity also. And they are already sensitized. They know how it feels to be a woman with mental health issues or the intellectual disabilities. So immediate, urgent, and effective action can be taken by the disabled people organizations if a woman goes to them. So these are the possible options available to have a positive system, welcoming system for the women. But the thing is, there has to be inclination and sensitivity towards such women, which unfortunately in Asia is still lacking, though some people would disagree with it, because in Nepal, we have OCMCs and other things at the district level where a complete holistic treatment is provided to the women, but then we don't have the manpower there or the funding there. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your powerful advocacy. Your presentation really emphasizes the urgent need to transform justice system so that women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities are not forced into the margin of society, the wrong side of the fence, as you phrased it. I really like that kind of picture that you painted there, but that they become included and value participants with rights fully recognized and respected. So thank you so much for your presentation, and it's such a pleasure to have you here. Our next advocate is Bhargavi. Bhargavi is a childhood survivor of psychiatric institution in India. Rejecting the medical model of mental health and coercive system of treatment, she has published several books and papers criticizing psychiatry and its practices. Bhargavi started the first organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities in India back in 1999, the Bapu Trust, and leads the largest population-based peer support program for the Global South, covering a population of 1 million people. That is very impressive. She started the organization Transforming Communities for Inclusion by traveling and sharing resources with other countries in Asia and the Pacific. TCI, in short, is now a global organization working to realize the full human rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Bhargavi, you are a self-advocate, a leader of an organization of persons with disabilities, and an academic with lived experience. When answering the questions about challenges and opportunities, we would appreciate hearing about the legal inclusion, exclusion of women with disabilities, as well as forced and coerced sterilization and the use of institution. Bhargavi, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Doreen, for that introduction. Thank you, Laura Lee and several other organizers for bringing me into this session. Long back in the mid-90s, when I started my work, many of my friends were disappearing. We had a very small, at that time, peer support was unknown and largely restricted to rural middle-class groups. And so when I started my work, every other week, someone or the other was disappearing. And then we realized that they were institutionalized. And when we went in to, find out, we had to literally do investigations to find out where they have been put away. Oftentimes we were not able to reach them because friends were not allowed by family members or by the institution authorities to visit. And of course, later on, we found out that visitors in general are discouraged, including visitors who are family members. And then we started calling it forced disappearance, which is a concept, at least I'm sure that all of you would have heard of this. This has heavy legal connotations. And forced disappearances of persons with psychosocial disabilities also has huge legal connotations. As we live our lives as persons with disabilities in the communities, we often do not think that the law is impacting on us. But it is, and more so for the most underrepresented, marginalized groups of persons with disabilities, including women with intellectual, multiple, neurodiverse identities, and persons with women with psychosocial disabilities. So I thank you for this opportunity to go down a little bit down memory lane to really think about when did I start experiencing the impact of the law. Well, I can go even further back and remember my mom who was forcibly admitted over and over again, and they said they were treating her, but the police were rounding her up, bundling her and bringing her here and there and putting her away, not visible to me. And when I visited those institutions, well, it was another story altogether. What were the police doing, with my mother, tying her up and literally soft cloth chains, all of that. If she was supposed to be getting healthcare treatment. So my childhood was filled with memories like this. Again, at that time, I did not know about the Lunacy Act, which was there at the time, and then it became the Mental Health Act. Yeah, I didn't know it was a law which allowed policemen to do this without naming it as violence. Ordinarily, if this happened in a household today in the 21st century, we would call it GBV, gender-based violence, whoever does it. And so at that time, and even now, this is not named as violence, gender-based or otherwise, whereas it should be. These practices have remained. They may have become more sophisticated, but they have remained. So then over the period of time, I have really thought a lot about what is it that makes the mental health system peculiar in terms of its healthcare practices. If I was a diabetic patient, or if I was having some other general health concerns, cancer treatments, infections, whatever it is, I would not be treated in this way. When did tying up somebody become a medical practice? What is that? There are no laws for treating diabetes, however high the sugar levels are, and however organ damage may have set in for this person. There is still no law which says that, well, bundle them up, take them in, and push drugs into them. There is no such thing. But for us, there is, and this is supposed to be a healthcare system. So legal frameworks are paradoxical. There are some peculiar features. These peculiarities works against women with psychosocial disabilities and other marginalized groups. Patients diagnosed with a mental health condition, unlike other health conditions, automatically become subjects of law. It is not that it's not the doctors who become holders of legal accountabilities, but rather the patient. When the mental health law in India was reformatted, people thought that it's going to protect the so-called patients or the subjects of that law, but it was not about that in any case. For many years, and even today in the law courts, persons are charged with a mental illness. It is something that has to be defended. It is something that somebody is accused of. And there is a whole jurisprudence around this legal play of determination or a finding of mental disorder. Earlier, it used to be, of course, of unsound mind. But now we have modern terms for the same process. Among all healthcare patients, the right to liberty is in contest for only one kind of patient, that is someone diagnosed with a mental health condition. Right to liberty, I think every democratic state would uphold this right as the most fundamental in their constitution. However, when it comes to persons who are found with a mental illness, right to liberty is not arbitrated as a constitutional issue in the context of state power to deprive a citizen of their liberty. Rather, it is arbitrated as an affirmative healthcare right, arbitrated through administrative orders by doctors' findings, so on and so forth. Several justice issues are missed over here. That deprivation of liberty is always a constitutional right to be duly processed by a court of law as a deprivation of liberty issue. When did a deprivation of liberty issue become a healthcare issue? Thus, depriving someone of their liberty, and forcibly taking them into an institution, restore their health. What kind of legal framework would permit a constitutional right to be diluted to administrative orders by doctors, by courts, and by lawyers? So these are some paradoxes that we have faced when working in the communities. Access to justice in the context of persons with disabilities has usually meant accessibility, like physical, digital accessibility, informational accessibility, so on and so forth. The next level of access to justice, which is also often recognized, is whether persons with disabilities are having the resources to actually avail of needed services, also the attitudinal barriers within the judicial system. The biggest barrier to the full inclusion of persons with disabilities has been, like many of the speakers have said, the legal incapacity laws, especially in the context of women. It is a given within the scope of human rights that all persons with disabilities have the right to work, for example, or the right to family, children, adoption, and so on. Kamala mentioned 47 provisions in Nepal. In India, we have over 150 provisions of incapacity. Supposing there is a woman who has the opportunity to work, has found a job opportunity, has applied on grounds of her merit, she is qualified for the job. At the job interview, there are questions about her disclosure about being a person with a psychosocial disability. And then she is asked for a fitness certificate from her psychiatrist. We call this in our movement the entry point issue. It is a legal gate that a person with a psychosocial disability has to pass through to access any kind of opportunity in society. Some countries have it very, very bad. Some countries have it very bad, and some are bad, like Nepal. There are countries which are way worse than that. None have removed these legal barriers despite 15 years the CRPD, an enormous number of observations and guidances on reforming the law. in the spirit of piloting a CRPD compliant deinstitutionalization project, I was leading a program in India. 11 women were deinstitutionalized. We took care of everything, their cost of living in open communities for 3 years. It took 3 years to even get a citizenship card for a small number of the women. 2 women eventually, after 3 years of work with the systems, got a card. Most women opted to go back home because at every step they were halted in their right to live in the community by one incapacity law, attitude, or barrier or the other. Eventually, 2 women after 3 years insisted to go back into the institution, unable to proceed further with the struggle to establish citizenship status on an equal basis with others. What is the extent of legal barriers, especially for women and underrepresented groups? Some examples. Women in the context of family, sexual and reproductive health rights, adoption, holding a bank account, managing property, and so forth, face barriers because of incapacity laws. While in most countries of the world, a woman has equal rights as a citizen, the legal disqualifiers around being of unsound mind or a person who's found to have a mental illness is a huge disqualifier. All citizenship rights. In fact, we've found documents of admission notes, by the court saying that this non-applicant has applied for admission and this non-person is admitted into the mental verbatim over 60. We've read 60, 70 documents like this, admission notes, reception order admissions, where the person doesn't have a name. In their records, we worked with the system for like 4 or 5 years. In the records, it's like unknown, and then one number is given. They are called by this name, unknown so-and-so number. And we found case after case of persons, designated in this way. In India, for example, the easiest way to divorce a woman is to charge her with a mental illness. Finally, some courts have woken up to the fact that such charges can be pure fabrication with the collusion of doctors and lawyers with interest in property, taking custody of children, not paying maintenance, so on and so forth. Tying medical compliances to social rights and entitlements. In several countries of the world, having a medical history of mental illness and treatment for it sets the stage for intensive medico-legal monitoring and surveillance around housing, social protection, insurance, general health care, etc. Again, the entry point issue, housing, if and only if you're taking your medicines, reporting regularly to your treatment facility, meeting your doctors, filling up your prescriptions, so on and so forth. So what are the legal solutions? Now, this also means, of course, that women cannot say no to, once you enter this system, you cannot say no to anything, including hysterectomies, sterilizations, it is force. The person has the right, has enjoyed the right to give consent. But even if that right is at stake, can you even call it force? So people are objectified to the extent that there is no question of asking them for their consent. The system takes over completely, and you can only be vegetative under this system. So other legal solutions, these systems are held and safeguarded by 2 kinds of professions, the medical professions and the legal professions, and of course the state power. Medical professions have put in effort in harm reduction, de-escalation of violence, reduction in harm caused within institutions and medical treatments, shifting from hazardous prescription drugs to other forms of support systems, and so on. Unless the legal professions, the legal academia also engage with these indomitably rigid barriers to inclusion of persons with psychosocial disabilities, such a mission of reforming mental health system will remain at the level of harm reduction and not full inclusion. Legal frameworks are often written in stone, goes into the curriculum, law teaching, case law, and national jurisprudence. It changes very slowly, if at all. 15 years of CRPD and a legacy of concluding observations, resolutions, guidances, studies, and so on have not impacted a single provision of legal incapacity, nor has a single country where mental health law is prevalent changed any unconstitutional provisions on disability-based detention. Whether the law should be taken down piecemeal whether having many programs can de-escalate the violence and detention practices. Those are questions which remain before us as professionals working in this area. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure to work with the team in preparation for this session. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Bhargavi. It's such a pleasure to have such strong advocates with that kind of caliber to be part of this discussion. The points you made are incredibly important for this conversation. We hope that the justice and disability communities can continue to discuss and find solutions together. Thank you so much to Dewi, Kamala, and Bhargavi to help us to recognize and learn about the complex challenges and provide entry points to improve access to justice for women with social and psychosocial and intellectual disability. Thank you so much for being in this webinar. The next part of the session will be led by Professor Eilionóir Flynn and Dr. Anna Arnstein-Kerslake from the National University of Ireland Galway Centre for Disability Law and Policy. We're a little bit under time constraints, so I will give you their bios and their background after the session. And with that, I hand over to Eilionóir. And I'm sorry, I know you kind of have other appointments to attend to. So over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And it's been such a privilege to be involved today, and especially to hear such powerful testimonies from all the advocates who've spoken before me, who really understand the challenges in the system and indeed are the best placed to deliver the solutions if only those in power would listen. And so I give my apologies in advance. One of the issues that has been raised by our speakers is the need for legal capacity of all persons with disabilities to be fully recognised. And we are actually briefing parliamentarians in the Irish Parliament in about 8 minutes' time on this very issue, because a new bill is going through our Parliament at present. So I will leave for that, but I will leave you in the capable hands of my colleague, Dr. Anna Arnstein-Kerslake, who is going to continue the presentation. So in a few minutes, I just want to cover some key issues and ways that we can approach the development of solutions to the challenges that the speakers before me have identified. And one really good tool that provides a roadmap for how we can address these issues is the UN International Principles and Guidelines on Access to Justice for Persons with Disabilities. This is a really important document which was approved by the UN General Assembly in a resolution in August 2020, and it is based on a study which I and other colleagues at the Centre for Disability Law and Policy in Galway completed for the then UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Catalina de Vandas Aguirre. And as part of that international principles and guidelines document, all of the issues, in fact, that we've heard about already are identified and solutions are put forward. And if you read the study that informed the development of those guidelines, you will also see good practice examples drawn from all regions around the world, from different cultures, different legal systems, different contexts, where there are different experiences of disabled people, including women and girls with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, that I think can give us ideas about the way forward. But all solutions will have to respect some fundamental principles that are outlined in this document. And one, again, to reiterate, is that disabled women must be recognised as legal actors, and their decisions and choices must be respected and given weight on an equal basis with others. This is really critical as a precondition for access to justice and for meaningful engagement with all elements of the justice system. Disabled women also need to be included as actors at all levels of the justice system, including in positions of power. So that means we need to see disabled women in powerful roles within police and law enforcement, within the senior members of the legal professions and the judiciary. And if we achieve this, then we will infuse better lived experience of gender and disability issues throughout the justice system as a whole. And of course, at all levels, we need to ensure that the justice system, both the formal justice system and the informal system, which we've heard about from our previous speakers, listens to the voices of disabled women and is informed and is gathering data on their experiences in relation to access to justice. So in order to do that, Anna will speak in a moment about the importance of legal needs surveys, but I think any research in this area and any solutions that we develop have to think about the whole justice journey that a woman with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities might be facing. So from the very beginning of consciousness raising or awareness of rights, making sure people do know what their rights are, and not only that they know them, but that there are lawyers and people in positions of power who also know these rights and who are willing to work with people to enforce them. And that is perhaps the more challenging aspect, but it is achievable. We also need to look at designing accessible justice systems, not just the physical infrastructure, but the procedures, how evidence is gathered from the very first point of contact. And there are some examples of positive practices that we can draw on here. For example, in the Australian state of Victoria, there's the Independent Third Person Programme, which provides communication support to people with intellectual and psychosocial or other communication disabilities upon their first point of contact with police, whether they're a victim, whether they're an alleged perpetrator, there's somebody who has to give a statement, they're a witness. All of those different roles are provided with support to communicate and ensure effective evidence is gathered at that very first stage. We can also see good examples of access audits, of police stations, of custody suites to make the environment more accessible, not just the physical infrastructure, but the communication and information environment as well. Legal standing, legal capacity is key, as we've said, and that must include the recognition of the individual as a legal actor who can pursue justice in their own name and is not reliant on family members or others to take cases on their behalf. We can also work on ensuring equal access to both the formal and informal justice system. So support to navigate both systems is needed, and ensuring that people are treated equally and fairly as an actor with agency in these systems is essential. Procedural accommodations are another very important element of the solution that we need to work on, and that can range from recognizing different forms of communication in the formal and informal justice system, making intermediaries who understand the person's communication and expression available, and having opportunities to try out the court environment before the formal proceedings commence. Finally, we must ensure equal opportunities throughout the system, and that includes support to prepare victim impact statements, making judgments available in accessible language or easy to read formats, and ensuring follow-up and enforcement of judicial decisions that respect the rights of persons with disabilities. To do all of this, it is essential to gather data and research, and for that purpose, it is going to be very important to have more accessible and responsive legal needs surveys on the access to justice experiences of women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities. So for that purpose, I will hand over to my colleague who's going to talk more about what a legal needs survey could look like and what it could achieve.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having us here with you today. I've been very impressed with the presentations thus far, and we're really happy to be included in such a wonderful group. I'll just give you a tiny bit of background of our work, because I think it's important to have a little bit of background of my work and Eilionóir's work before I give you an overview of what we're planning to do with an upcoming legal needs survey. The main focus of my work and Eilionóir's work has been on the right to legal capacity. And we've done that research for many years now, I'd say close to 15 years. And we've done research in a variety of different ways. So much of the research we've done has been around looking at the laws and figuring out how they deny legal capacity, how that affects access to justice, and how law and policy can be changed to amend that. However, that's only one part of this puzzle, we believe. Another really important part of that is the actual practice, what's happening on the ground. Myself and Eilionóir have both done several research projects on supported decision-making, both in the context of the criminal justice system, but also in the context of other systems, such as consumer transactions, as well as looking specifically at gender-based denials to legal capacity across various systems. The reason that we are aware of these issues is both personal and professional. We both exist in disability communities, and we have so many people close to us that have suffered under various different legal regimes and social regimes that are not recognizing disabled women, and particularly women with intellectual and or psychosocial disabilities, as legal actors, and are not giving them credibility within our justice systems. To share a personal story with you, my sister, who is 2 years younger than me, has Prader-Willi syndrome and schizophrenia, which means she has psychosocial disability, intellectual disability, and physical disability. She was sexually abused when she was 16, and she's happy for me to share her story. And the prosecutor told us that my sister's not a credible witness, and the prosecutor, although having quite a bit of evidence of the sexual abuse, refused to go forward with the case. It's obviously, as these issues always are, a much more complicated story, but that gives you an idea of how important these issues are to Eilionóir and I. So one other way that we're going to begin some research in this area is rolling out a legal needs survey. Now, this will be a really interesting way to do some more research in the area. And the goal of the legal needs survey really is to provide a much needed space for the voices of disabled women, and in particularly disabled women with intellectual and or psychosocial disability. The focus will be on Asia and the Pacific, and we'll be using the methodology that's well established by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Importantly, we'll be tailoring that methodology to both culturally specific needs of the region, as well as the specific needs of disabled women. That includes adapting it to focus on legal capacity and legal decision-making, focus on finding out what the main barriers for disabled women are in the region, and finding out what are good practices that are taking place, what accessible information is available, and what is still needed as well. In addition, we'll be asking questions about how to best achieve recognition of legal capacity and access to justice, including what's an appropriate environment for decision-making, what are appropriate timelines for a justice process. These are things that we've seen are often overlooked in law and policy reform processes, and we feel that it's absolutely critical for disabled women themselves to be giving this information. And in fact, they're really the only people that can give this information. And hopefully we'll be able to use this research to go on and influence law and policy reform processes. I think those were the main points that I was hoping to cover, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And again, thank you very much for the invitation here today.
Thank you so much, Eilionóir and Anna. Good luck with the Irish Parliament for the legislation. This was a super exciting look at solution and the legal needs survey. our team at UN Women is super delighted to work with the Center for Disability Law and Policy on this survey so that we can understand the key legal needs directly from the women and their representative organization, as well as the justice sector and the service providers, right? It will provide such an important evidence so that we can actually use that to tailor a solution to close the justice gap that we've heard about it. So as promised, just a little bit of a bio because we didn't have time before. Eilionóir is a professor of the School of Law and director of the Center for Disability Law and Policy at the National University of Ireland, Galway. She has published writing on the rights of persons with disability, including her book From Rhetoric to Action, implementing the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, and the book Disabled Justice. Anna is an internationally recognized legal academic in the field of human rights, disability rights, and gender justice. She has also published widely in these areas, including her recent book, Restoring Voice to People and Legal Capacity and Gender. She has led several large-scale research projects as well as law and policy reforms initiatives and has participated widely in consultation with governments and other bodies. She also provided support to the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disability on their general comment on the rights to equal recognition before the law. So thank you so much for the two of you to be on the call today and provide us with this really great information. We are a little bit under time constraint, but I think given that we will have a lot of people who work in the legal field listen to this session or the recording later, I think it is really important to hear from you what kind of advice would you give to justice professional to advance women's access to justice, especially for women with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities, and what steps can be taken at individual level. Anna, maybe you could start, and if our advocates would like to add to that as well, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Doreen. Thank you so much. And yes, I should say that we're really happy to be working with UN Women on this project, and it's really wonderful. I think that our research agendas have really aligned in this space. Yeah, wonderful to be here and wonderful to be working with you on a longer term basis as well. I think that's a wonderful question that you've posed. What would our advice be to justice professionals? And I think my main advice is actually really simple, and it's to listen. I think it's something that's one of the key problems I think that disabled women face when encountering the justice system, is that they're not listened to. And not only are they not listened to, they're not taken seriously. So I think the main advice I would have is listen to disabled women when they're engaging with the justice system on any level. The other thing would be to be creative and to remember that this justice system has not been created by disabled women. It's not created to meet the needs of disabled women. And for that reason, justice professionals need to be creative in how they can develop solutions for the justice needs of disabled people, because the system right now isn't doing that. It's not made to do that. And we need to work hard to reform it in order for it to be doing that. But individual justice professionals, before we actually achieve that reform, individual justice professionals can take it upon themselves to be creative, listen to disabled women, and do what they can to sort of circumvent the barriers that currently exist to justice in the system. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. If there are no other hands up, we might have to close, given that we started a little bit later. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much for all the panelists for the contribution to today's working session. I think a common thread that we have heard about from the participants is that we must take a people-centered approach to justice. And this entails recognizing human diversity and the complexity of achieving justice solutions for all. As a first step, simply understanding, as Anna mentioned, the legal needs, maybe through conversation, through tools such as the legal needs survey, will give us a sure footing supported by data and evidence. And then we can develop an implementation together that are co-designed by people with disabilities. I already said my thank you. I'm a little bit confused now. To close the session, we will hear a message from a young man, Morgan Mays, the co-founder of Japesti, Indonesia's Let's Speak Up class, because we also must remember that men and boys have an important role in advocating for equality and inclusion of working with women and girls to achieve justice for all. And as we continue with the World Justice Forum, let's keep asking ourselves, is the legal system as we know it today capable of delivering justice for women with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities? I think we all know the answer. So we also have to ask ourselves, what can we individually and collectively do to improve the situation? With that, I will ask the video to be started, and thank you all so much for the participation. And I wish you a wonderful time at the World Justice Forum and to listen in all the interesting sessions that will follow. Thank you so much.
For me, justice is when they treat me as a person first, who has the same rights as others, and change all the laws that discriminate me and my friends. Stop labeling us. Please read along with me. What is printed on my t-shirt? Don't count my chromosome. Encourage my participation and value my ability. Read the bias. It is my fight.